So I'll give some introduction and then you can share.
Right.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to episode 16 of Zooming Conservation. Today's special episode is one of the important species, vultures. Well, International Vultures Day is celebrated on September 7th. Vultures are the crucial part of our ecosystem, and their conservation is essential for maintaining ecological balance. We are privileged to have with us Dr. Vibhu Prakash, a renowned ornithologist with over 40 years of experience in the field. He has retired as a deputy director and principal scientist ornithology from BNHS, Bombay Natural History Society, in 2022, and his contribution to the study of conservation of birds, especially raptors and vultures, are monumental. Dr. Prakash has obtained his PhD from University of Bombay in 1989, focusing on ecology of raptors at Koiladev National Park in Bharatpur, Rajasthan. His work on bird migration and wetland-dependent species such as Siberian and Sarus cranes is widely recognized. Since 1984, he has been involved in extensive research of birds of prey, including vultures, and it is he who was the first to notice the dramatic population decline of gyps vultures in Koiladev National Park in 1997. Throughout his career, Dr. Prakash has received numerous prestigious awards, including Marsh Award for Wildlife Conservation in 2003, the Royal Bank of Scotland Award for Species Conservation in 2016, Prani Mitra Award in 2021, and the Disney Conservation Hero Award in 2022. In addition to this, he was honored as the Century Lifetime Wildlife Service Award in 2022. Dr. Prakash led to the Vulture Conservation Program and BNHS from 1996, spearheading the establishment of 4 conservation breeding centers for Indian gyps vultures. His tireless efforts have been instrumental in setting up vulture safe zone and reintroduction of vultures into the wild. He also helped to draft action plan for vulture conservation 2020 to 2025 for Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Government of India. He serves as co-chair of the technical committee to save SAVE, Saving Asia's Vultures from Extinction, and an independent member of National Vultures Recovery Committee. His dedication and commitment towards the conservation of vultures have made profound impact in India, not only in India but also across the country. Join me in welcoming Dr. Vibhu Prakash and understand more about the conservation of vultures in India. Thank you, sir, for joining in.
Thank you so much. I think I'll share my presentation and then I'll start.
Yes.
So much. Could you see my presentation, please?
Yes, sir, I can.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Apurva. Very good evening to all of you. I am really grateful to Central Zoo Authority, especially the member secretary, for giving me this opportunity to talk to you on vulture conservation in India. I am Vibhu Prakash and I have worked with the Bombay Natural Society for over 40 years, especially on raptors and vultures. And today I will be telling you all what we have learned during my 40 years and also what vultures are and what happened to them and what conservation measures have been taken to save this species from possible extinction. And this month we all have been celebrating the International Vulture Awareness Day. And if 30 years ago, if you have talked about celebrating Vulture Awareness Day, people would have laughed at us because 30 years ago we had millions of vultures and nobody were really worried about their conservation. And this is what happened when the species is numerous and suddenly it goes down. So So vultures are in fact obligate scavengers. That means they never ever hunt. They always eat dead meat. And vultures are probably the only vertebrate which have evolved to scavenge. And they have certain adaptations, especially like they can eat over 40 to 50% of their body weight in one go and can go without food for days. They have a crop under their neck where they can fill up, and then whenever there's food abundance, and then they can go without food. And they are very fast feeders. They have a very long serrated tongue, and they can actually slurp meat. And vultures are social birds, so they are always in a flock.
All
And the way they search for food is hello. And the way they search for food is vultures are big-bodied bird, but then they fly and get into the thermals. And once they are into the thermals, they hardly spend energy, and they can go long distance, hundreds of kilometers, without spending any energy. And once they are soaring in the sky, what they also do, they'll keep an eye on other scavengers and predators on the ground. And if they see them going in one direction, a few of them will come down a bit and investigate. And if they see a carcass, they will not come down immediately, but they will start taking tight circles, thereby indicating to their kinds floating in the sky, they come, there's food. And once they descend, hundreds of vultures will come from hundreds of kilometers, and they will cover up the carcass and finish up a carcass of a full grown cattle about 300 kilos within matter of minutes. So they were really efficient scavengers. And as you know, a dead body is virtually a culture medium of bacteria and fungus. But vultures, before bacteria and fungus can form spores, the vultures would feed on it and thereby prevent the spread of disease to humans and to the animals. So, so we have about 16 different species of vultures in Europe, Asia, and Africa, and we have seven more in the continent of America, but they are not actually vultures. We have these 16 species which are vultures, and they are actually raptors, belong to exhibitory. In 2000, none of these 16 vultures were considered of any conservation risk. They had comfortable population size, but now 11 out of 16 species are at the risk of extinction. Out of them, 8 are critically endangered. That means they have a strong risk of going extinct within 10 years. And out of these 8 species, 4 are in India. So we have 9 species which are recorded from Indian subcontinent, and all these 9 species, they exploit the same food resource. That means the dead animals, but they never ever compete because they exploit it differently. There are 2 species, the cinereous vulture and the Eurasian griffin. They are the 2 species which are truly migratory. That means they come only in winter to the country. Rest of the species are mostly resident, but Himalayan griffin, it has a small population with breeds within the country, but most of that comes from outside the country, from Central Asia and Mongolia. The Egyptian vulture has 2 races. One of the race, the dominant race, which is largely wintering, which comes from Central Asia, and uh, largely from Central Asia. So as I said, these vulture, although they exploit the same food resource, that is the dead animal, but they do it differently. So we have the cinereous vulture, and king vulture. They feed on the tough skin and the muscles which stick to them, and they actually open up the carcasses. They have got very strong bill, but they are never found in huge numbers, and they are usually the first one to come up at the carcass. Then we have this smallest vulture called the Egyptian vulture. This vulture, it when other vultures have finished up most of the carcass, then they come and feed on the tendons and the tough meat sticking to the joints. And they also feed on the scats of mammalian carnivores and scavengers, which also come to feed on the carcass. So they do a thorough cleaning job. Then we have bearded vulture, which is found only in high mountains. It feeds mostly on bone marrow. So what it does when a skeleton of a animal is found, it takes a piece of bone, flies up and drops it on a rock, and when it breaks, it eats the marrow. It has got a long tongue which can go inside, and then it takes away all the marrow. Then we have the gyp species of vultures. Gyp species are the typical vulture species where whenever you talk of vultures, you really talk of gyp species of vulture. They are big bodied, with a long neck, long bare neck, which has no feathering, and very strong bill. And they are usually, in wherever they occur, they form 99% of the population of vultures. So they are always in huge numbers. And they were the ones which were in huge number in our country, and then they have now almost disappeared. So we have this white-backed vulture, which was probably the commonest large birds of prey in the world. And all these gyp species of vultures, they feed on soft tissues and visceral organ. And vultures have very variable plumage. Only when they reach adulthood by 5 or 6 years, then they have a very uniform plumage. Otherwise, when they are juveniles, from 1 to 5 years, you can see them in very different plumage, and they actually look different species. So one has to be very careful in identifying these vulture species. Only this bird is an adult, this is a juvenile, and they look very different. Similarly, the other species which we have of the gyp species or the is the long-billed vulture. This vulture it nests only on cliffs and rocks, and it is found south of Gangetic Plains up to the tip of the country, and it is found mostly in India. Very small population breeds in Pakistan. It's largely endemic to country. And this species also the juveniles have very variable plumage, and sometimes becomes difficult to say whether it's the same species. It's a long-billed vulture. So this is how they look very different. Then we have slender-billed vulture, which is found north of Gangetic Plains. From it used to be found from Himachal Pradesh to Assam, but now it is confined to Assam, and a very small population exists in West Bengal. And this vulture is probably the rarest vulture in the world. It has got less than 1,000 birds remaining in the wild. And here also, the adults and juveniles, they look very different. This is an adult, this is a juvenile. So then we have the other gyps vulture, which is called the Himalayan griffin. This is largely migratory, and it is found. The adults are found in Himalayas, and they are sedentary, but the juveniles, they in winter they are found in the plains also, till almost till the uh, tip of our country, but mostly in Western India and all. And they here also there's a lot of difference between adults and juveniles. That this is a juvenile which looks more like a white-backed vulture juvenile than a Himalayan griffin. Then we have Eurasian griffin, which is largely migratory, and this also has very different plumage. So, as I said, gyps vultures were very common in our country. We have an estimate of about 40 million vultures, 4 crore vultures in our country. And this picture was taken in early 80s in Delhi by my colleague, Dr. Gautam Narayan. And if you see in this picture, every inch of space is occupied by vultures. If you see the top of the water tank or top of the buildings and all, everywhere there are vultures. And this slaughterhouse waste dump, vultures were doing a thorough cleaning job, and there was no stench on the housing colony which was next to it, because you know what stench is actually bacterial and fungal action on putrefying meat, and vultures will finish up everything which can putrefy organic. So they were doing a very good thorough cleaning job. But unfortunately, vulture population crashed in mid 90s. and I will tell you what happened and what measures are being taken. So when a species occur in huge numbers, unless you monitor it, you will never know whether it's declining or increasing. Because if you have if vultures where a population of about 4 crores, even if 50% of the population was gone, so 2 crores also is a huge number. And unless you are monitoring, you will not be able to say whether they are declining or not. Fortunately, Bombay Natural History Society monitors vulture and raptor population across the country, and because they were monitoring it, they could identify that the vulture population was declining. Especially the work done in Kevla National Park was very important because that is the place where most of the data came from. So in Kevla National Park, which is just a 29 square kilometer national park in Bharatpur in Rajasthan, there were over 350 nests of white-backed vulture in late 80s, 86, 87. But by 96, 97, 50% of the nests were gone. And by 2000, there was no nesting and there were hardly any vultures in the park. So there were massive decline in the population. And the monitoring of vultures and raptors is also done nationwide every 4 years by going to national parks, on highways, and to the carcass dumps. So, based every 4 years, this exercise is done, and based on this, we knew that the vulture population had declined across the country by over 90%. And by 2007, we had lost almost 99.9% of the whiteback population and 99% of long-billed and slender-billed population. But fortunately, because of the various conservation measures taken by 2012, the whiteback population has started stabilizing, or it was increasing a bit, but still it was very small. But the long-billed was still declining, and this trend still continues. So this video I have just showing what happens when vultures are not there, and the carcasses they putrefy, and what you see this white stuff is just maggots, which are fly larvae. What you don't see is the millions of bacteria and fungus which grow on these dead bodies, and they form spores, go into the soil, and then they are almost immortal. And whenever they come across healthy hosts, they attack and cause diseases. Now, this is what happens in absence of vultures. And when vultures were there, they whenever they are dead, but like in India, we don't have a organized carcass dump or organized carcass disposal system, so it's usually thrown out in the open. And when a body is thrown out, animal body is thrown out in the open, vultures will very quickly come and they will cover up the body and finish up everything in the body. So dogs will get no chance getting at the carcass at all. But now, since vultures are not there, dogs get to eat, get a lot of food to eat. And dogs are like vermins, and whenever there's food abundance, they have a bigger litter size. And dogs are also cannibals, so they usually litter at isolated places because other dogs should not eat their pups. But now, because of the food abundance, you will have dogs littering at the carcass dumps, and so the pups which grow up in these carcass dumps, they are ferocious, and whenever they come across humans or wildlife, they attack and cause diseases. And dogs carry number of diseases. Rabies is one of the most fatal disease which they carry and can spread. So when the vulture population started declining, we tried to find out why the population was declining, why there was high mortality in vultures. So we looked at the usual ecological reasons like food shortage. So we actually did a count of regular count of carcass available to vultures, and we found that although the carcass availability has declined because of various reasons, but there was still enough food for the vultures to sustain a good population of vultures, and only 5% of the carcasses we saw had vultures feeding on it. So food was not a problem. Then we looked at habitat, and although there were little changes in habitat, but there was still good habitat available. And vultures are found from desert to evergreen forest, so they occupy a very different kind of habitat, and they can nest on whatever the trees available, like from a small 30 feet high Kijri tree in desert to a very high tree in evergreen forest. So habitat was not a problem. We also looked at chemical contamination, which has caused havoc with bird population across the country, especially DDT almost wiped out peregrine falcon and also the bald eagle. So we thought maybe the pesticides, especially the organochlorines, are causing problem. But when we looked at vulture tissues, we didn't find enough load of organochlorines which could kill vultures. So vultures we found vultures sitting in peculiar uh, position with their necks hanging down. Once these symptoms appear, the vultures will usually die within a week to 10 days. And when we picked up these vultures, we found that most of the vultures, these vultures were suffering from visceral gout. Visceral gout is a condition when there is a kidney failure and uric acid gets deposited on the visceral organs, and vultures die of dehydration. So 96% of the vulture population of dead vultures we got had visceral gout. But while we were working in India, there were scientists from Peregrine Fund. They were working in Pakistan, and they have very similar result, except that they also found that all the vultures which had died of visceral gout also had residues of a drug called diclofenac in them. And diclofenac is a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug which is given to cattle in pain and inflammation. And so in Pakistan, they experimentally fed vultures on diclofenac and through vulture buffalo meat, and they could create and the vultures died, showing very similar symptoms as we have seen in the wild. So it was very clear that diclofenac was indeed killing them. Vultures get exposed to diclofenac when they feed on a carcass of a cattle which was given diclofenac within 72 hours of its mortality. If uh, if diclofenac is given and if 70 within 72 hours, all the diclofenac is excreted out. But if they die before that and vulture feed on it, then the vultures get diclofenac. So when we found out that this was a problem, we also looked at the vulture tissues which we had in India, and we found that 76% of our vultures had died of visceral gout, and we found that all of them which had died of visceral gout also had residues of diclofenac. So it was very difficult to believe that diclofenac can kill millions of vultures. So what we did, we collected all our information and tried to find out what is the prevalence of diclofenac which is required, which can kill so many vultures in the country. And so we did a mathematical modeling with the help of one Professor Rees Green of Cambridge University, and he came out with a figure that if less than 1% or 0.8% of the carcasses are diclofenac, it can cause the kind of crash in population which is seen. And it is because of vultures ecology, and the vultures can travel long distances. If there's no diclofenac used here, it's used at 200 kilometers, then also vultures can die because they go there in such they can go 200 kilometers in search of food. So all these uh, things were taken in consideration. So very little diclofenac was actually required to kill the cause this kind of crash. Fortunately for us, when we reported this to the government of India, they were very swift in taking action. And in 2004, a vulture recovery plan was formulated, which was incorporated into Vulture Action Plan of 2006. So the very major recommendations of the action plan was to identify a safe alternative to diclofenac, a ban on veterinary use of diclofenac, and to develop a captive vulture population and a conservation breeding program. It was thought that the way vultures were dying, we had lost more than 90% of the vulture population, and the rest 10% can go very fast. So the experts thought that unless we bring a good number of vultures in captivity, we may lose the vulture population because at that time we didn't have any idea what was actually killing them. So it was thought that we develop a captive holding facilities for vulture. But then it was decided that to hold a captive vulture population, it will be good to have a conservation breeding program of the vulture because there was enough expertise there to have a start of vulture conservation. So the first objective was to identify a safe alternative to diclofenac. So what the scientists did, they did a uh, global survey of the drugs, especially the NSAIDs, which are being used to treat vultures and raptors. And they found that there was a drug called meloxicam, which has never caused any problem. So meloxicam was given to vultures by Indian Veterinary Research Institute, and they found that it was safe. You know what happens when there's NSAID toxicity? That if the NSAID is toxic, then the uric acid levels in the blood shoot up. So when diclofenac is given, the uric acid levels shoot up, but when meloxicam is given, nothing happens to the vultures. So meloxicam was found to be a safe drug in 2006. So we recommended it to Government of India, and Government of India very kindly banned the veterinary use of diclofenac in 2006. And in the same order, they also said that instead of diclofenac, we should use meloxicam because it is safe for vultures. But very soon we realized that the problem continues, and vultures were dying of visceral gout, and they were dying of residues of diclofenac. So we found that the people who treat cattle in India, there are number of people who are not trained veterinarian also treat cattle, and these people, they are not aware of the welfare of the cattle, and they are not aware whether drugs are banned and all, but they know which drug is good, which is effective. Diclofenac, unfortunately, is a very effective drug. It gives relief within 15 minutes because it's a few drugs which can break blood-brain barrier. So they were when diclofenac was banned for veterinary use, they started buying human formulations of multi-dose vials, uh, uh, and they were treating cattle because you need 10 to 30 ml for a cattle, and you can buy a 30 or 50 ml vial for human use. So fortunately, we again went to the Government of India. This it was banned, but only in 2015. So by the time we had to take other measures to make sure the vulture population survives. Actually, you need only a 3 ml ampule for human use. So that's why vulture conservation or breeding or holding centers were established. So we now have 8 different vulture conservation breeding centers in the country. The first one was established in Pinjore in 2004, and then subsequently other centers were established. It was very good that the Central Zoo Authority brought out a working manual for vulture conservation. This manual gives you in detail how to establish a vulture conservation breeding. It gives you the average size, the husbandry and care, and how much the food should be given, how it should be given. And it also ensures there's uniformity in management of vulture centers across the country. So it is a very good manual. It's almost for, and it's very good for any center manager who wants to establish a vulture conservation. An important thing for vulture conservation breeding center is selection of site. So the selection of site for a vulture conservation breeding center should be within the normal distribution range of the species, away from human habitation and relatively free of natural vulture population. So if you have a vulture center within the natural distribution range of the species, you don't have to worry about the elements or the pathogens because vultures will be exposed to that and no problem. And it should be close to a big city where specialized veterinary facilities are available, and should be connected by railroad and air. It should have water and telephone connections at the time, and it should be at least 5 kilometers away from wild birds or animals kept in captivity, as with just to be on safe side as far as disease is concerned. But it should be as far as possible away from a poultry farm as much as possible, and ideally around 25 kilometers. And minimum 5 acres of land is required for housing and breeding 25 pairs of each of the three species, and should be a degraded patch of forest with a few trees. The site should be a place where natural calamities like floods, earthquakes, and forest fire do not occur, which is important. So the vulture conservation breeding program was established in 2004. The objective was to release 600 pairs of each of the three species in the wild, and it was thought that they will form a viable, uh, genetically diverse such self-sustaining population. And 25 pairs of each of the three species as one center will be able to produce a population of 100 pairs in 15 years. And six centers were needed to set up to produce 600 pairs. First release to be initiated in the year 2020. The vulture conservation program is a long-term program because vultures you can age only till they are 5 years old. So for a conservation breeding program, we need to catch young birds or nestlings, and we will have to wait till 5 to 6 years when they start breeding. And the first generation can be used again for the founding stock, and then from the second generation only the birds can be released if the environment is safe for the vultures to be released back in the wild. So this is a typical layout plan for a vulture center, 5 acres of land, and there are different aviaries for various purposes. These big aviaries are called colony aviaries where vultures are held in social group, because vultures are social birds and they have to be kept in a flock, even in captivity. So in vulture centers, very good care is taken of quarantine facility. The quarantine facility is about 10 kilometers from the main center. So whenever the vultures are brought to the center, they are first taken to the quarantine facility, and they are kept there for 45 days. 45 days is the incubation period of the common prevalent disease for birds in the country, and it is the longest incubation period for any disease. And so the birds are kept there. Their health is checked frequently, and if they are found healthy, they are brought to the center. And if they are nestlings, they are kept in nursery aviary. But they are holding. They if they're 1 to 2 years old, they are kept in holding aviaries. So these are the colony aviaries, which are 100 feet long, 40 feet wide, and 20 feet high. They are the longest aviary, and there are 30 to 35 birds can be kept in this. They have very good ventilation. They are open from the top. They have a food hatch. They have a nesting material hatch. There are cots for nesting, and the perches are there for the birds to perch on. An important thing for big birds which are kept in captivity is that they have to be perched most of the time in captivity, whereas in wild, 60% of the time they are in air. So while perched in captivity, they may develop bumblefoot or pressure sores in their foot pad. And once they develop foot pad, it's very difficult to treat it. So it's always good to give them a rough surface by winding the perch with coconut rope. So there are other aviaries also in the center, like hospital aviaries for when a bird gets sick, or breeding aviaries for the pair which are not doing well in the colony aviary, and a display aviary for people because they are off display facilities. Some birds are kept in display aviary for the people to see the birds. So all the birds are marked with the uh, with a leg ring and a microchip, and their morphometrics are recorded. The feeding is very important since the drugs are a problem. So the goats are kept in the care of the center for 10 days. And if a goat is treated with diclofenac or any other toxic drug, it is excreted out within 7 to 8 days. So then only they are slaughtered and they are skinned and fed to the vultures. They are skinned because these vultures don't feed on skin, and the skin rots. So one vulture gets 4 kilos of meat per week. That works out to be 2 kilos of meat mm, per feeding day. So we feed them twice a week. And a vulture gets about 500 grams of meat per day, which works out to be 5% of his body weight, which is what they are eating. And they are a little underfed, so we keep them in good health. So once vultures are fed, they usually like to bathe themselves. Since they are social bird, there are no fights. Even like hungry bird feeds first. Similarly, birds which is taking bath is takes bath and then he comes out. So they are never serious fights because they are social birds and they have to live together. So all the activities of vultures are synchronized. So whatever they do, whether they are feeding, whether they are flying, whether they are sunning, or whether they are bathing, they all do it together. Like here, whenever there is good sunshine, they spread the wings and spread the wings, and this is largely for thermoregulation and shedding ectoparasites. Their plumage is really waterproof, and they can really shake and shed all the water. But this they do it for to shape up their plumage and for shedding the ectoparasites. So the way the vultures are kept in the aviaries, they get very good wing draft. So whenever there is a good draft of wind, the vultures do exercise like this. And if the vultures can do exercise like this, when they are released, they will be able to fly without any problem. So vultures, they form pairs. Vultures start breeding only when they are 5 to 6 years old. But when they are about 3 years old, they form pairs, and the male bird usually offers a twig to the female, and the female accepts it. They form a pair forever, and uh, then they start looking for a nest site, and they may also lay an egg after 3 years, but that is usually infertile. Once one of the pair dies, it is almost replaced almost immediately. This is how the nesting happens at the center. The nesting starts in September, October, and by December the egg laying happens, and the chick is out by January. So most of the in the aviaries in the centers have CCTV, and CCTV is a very good instrument. You can record behavior without disturbing them, and see this female is laying at dusk, and we could record it and it's laying an egg. And the important thing is we thought that the birds would be sitting down and laying egg because they are tall birds. So thought that the egg may break and all, but they stand and lay egg. So the incubation period is for 55 days, and both male and female equally contribute in the incubation. An incubation shift can be very long, to 10 to 12 hours sometimes. And because the incubation shift is long, they don't leave the egg, but they stand up at the nest and do wing exercise to keep them in shape. So usually the egg is laid in December when it is very cold, and they usually don't leave the egg. So the chick hatches after 55 days of incubation, and it has got a sparse coat of down. So its thermoregulation is not very well developed. So it is brooded by the parents almost all the time for next 45 days. But during this period, it is always fed as the parents bring the food in the crop. When the chick is born, it is about 150 grams, but it within 3 4 months it becomes 5 kilos. So its growth rate is very fast, and it requires a lot of calcium. So the parents, in fact, bring big bones in their beak in their crop, and they feed it to the chick, which swallows it hungrily. So that's how they get a good supply of calcium, and the chick uh, growth is maintained. Here you will see how the chick the parent regurgitates a bone and the chick feeds on it immediately. And both the parents are there when the chick is being fed. So here you see how a bone, which is quite a long bone, which probably a rib bone, is taken out by one of the parents, and the chick immediately swallows it. So see how big bone they can swallow because the crop is very extended. So by 50 to 60 days, the chick should start standing up. If it is not standing, that means it has got calcium deficiency, and then it will never be able to stand up. So once it starts standing up, that means the husbandry and care has been good, and the chick will now most probably survive and fly off. So the vultures lay only one egg per year, but If for certain reasons the egg is lost within 3 weeks, they tend to lay again, and the centers, they take advantage of this. So once the egg is laid, the parents are allowed to incubate it for a week or 10 days, and then it is removed, and the parents then lay again within 3 weeks. And this is how we go up and take the egg in a egg box without shaking much. And then it is brought to the incubation room, which is thermo-controlled, and it has got tabletop incubators where the eggs are kept. 4 egg can be incubated at a time. So we first scatter them just to see whether they are fertile. We can see uh, blood vessels and all of that. So an egg should lose 14 to 17% of its weight by the time it hatches. So we wait every 3 days, and if it is not losing enough weight, it has to be drilled. And if it is losing too much weight, then the humidity in the incubator is increased to 60 to 70%, and then it stops losing a lot of weight. And once the weight loss is controlled, it usually hatches. For 40 days, the egg looks really dead, but after 40 days, if it's fertile and you put it on a solid surface, it really uh, twitches, and you can see how violently it touches, and then you know that there's life in it, and we can expect a chick in a few days. So the egg starts calling. That's called internal PAPE when it's 15 days, 50 days old, and by 53rd days it cracks. Then it is shifted to brooder room, and since uh, everything is synchronized in vultures, so they tend to lay a egg at the same time. So at the same time, eggs are removed. So we have number of eggs in the brooder where and they have cracked and they are about. In the brooder, in the incubator, the temperature is set as 37 point 3 to 30, is set at 36.3 to 36.9 degrees, and but in the brooder it is just 36 degrees. So the chick is bound with a very sparse coat of down, and for 12 hours doesn't eat anything, and then it is gradually given mussels, just 3 grams 3 times a day, and then the food is increased. And we keep a strict eye on his weight gain, and for first 3 days we don't let the weight increase by more than 7%, and from 3 to 20 days not more than 9%, and after that again 5%, and beyond 40 days not more than 2% per day. So after 3 days, we give it all different parts of the body, like we give muscles, liver, heart, rib bones, and proportionately, and we monitor the weight gain of the bird. From 3 days onwards, it is important to keep the chicks out in the open to get vitamin D3, and so they're kept outside, and just to prevent imprinting, all the chicks are kept together all the time, and there is very little human touch with them. So they are always reared in group to prevent imprinting. So when they are about to fly, they are soft. A ring of a soft cloth is attached, and then a Darwick ring attached to their rings just for the identification. So there is usually no difference between a hand hair reared and a chick reared by its parents. And then they are kept together in the holding every once they fledge. So we have good number of vultures at different centers, and we have also hatched good number of birds, mostly at Pinjore, Baksa Rani, and Bhopal. So now the prevalence of diclofenac and other toxic drug has also come down over the years because of the ban, and the multi-dose vials for human use has also been banned, which was a problem for vultures. And recently, two other drugs were also banned, like the the ketoprofen, and aceclofenac, which will also help in uh, making the area safe for vultures. So the first release was attempted in 2016, and it was a soft release So in a soft release, the vultures are released in a pre-release aviary, which is very open, and vultures can see all around. They can see the habitat, they can see the animals, they can see the humans and all that. And so, since vulture centers are off display, but when we thought of releasing the birds, we invited public figures, especially the chief minister of Haryana, to come and release the birds in the pre-release aviary as a release program. So we also attracted wild vultures just outside the pre-release aviary, just to make sure that there is a lot of interaction between the captive bred vultures and the wild vultures. Because vultures are social birds, and we expected that these birds will join the wild birds once they are released. So when we were doing the release program, there were a lot of skepticism that the birds which are kept in captivity will not be able to fly. So first we released two Himalayan griffin, which was not critically endangered, and they were in captivity for over 10 years as the other birds. So they were released first by the Union Minister on 3rd June 2006. So the gate of the pre-release aviary was remotely um, lifted, but the vultures didn't fly away for all 24 hours. And we had kept food and water, but they didn't come down. But then suddenly in the afternoon, they flew out. And you see how efficiently they went out as if they were always wild. And they were also provided food when they would be feeding the other wild vultures in the wild. And within a month or so, the release vultures started soaring, but it will never collide anywhere, not even in the man-made structure, and would start using thermals to get up to the uh, get up on the sky. So so it was a very encouraging thing, and because uh, we knew that the birds which are kept in captivity can be released in the wild. So then the reintroduction of captive bred birds were done in 2020 when birds were deployed with geotag tags and EOPS tags, and just for tracking, and they were released by the Haryana Forest Minister in the wild. Uh, So none of the birds flew out for 48 hours, but then gradually they started flying out. But wild birds also came into the aviary, and then gradually they started going out. But as we were expecting, they all went in different direction, and they went by one. But eventually they joined the wild flock, and but a number of times for a couple of years we have to provision food for this vulture, because we will monitor them and see if they look at the crop. If they have not eaten, food will be provisioned. So gradually they started moving around, and then they also nested. One pair also was formed and nested just outside the park, which is the ultimate success of the conservation of the release program. So the birds have also been released from Rajabhat Kazan in West Bengal. So before releasing, we made sure that the area was safe for vultures, and there was a wild vulture population. There was food availability for vultures. Habitat was available. Prevalence of diclofenac and other NSAIDs were very less, and there was no other threat to vultures in the area. So undercover pharmacy surveys told us that the meloxicam was becoming popular, diclofenac was going down, but there was a very increase of nimesulide and aceclofenac. Fortunately, aceclofenac is banned now, but we hope that nimesulide will also be banned, so and area will be safe for vultures. We also monitored food availability, and we found that the food was there, and there were in most of the cases food was not attended either by vultures or by other scavengers. And we also do advocacy and awareness. The centers also do advocacy and awareness meetings, calling the government officials and the drug controllers in Russia and the druggists and chemists, telling them not to use vulture toxic drugs in treating cattle. And awareness meetings are also done with forest department, local government functionaries, and also by addressing the senior officers of MOEF. Government of India has come out with an action plan for vulture conservation 2020-2025, and this came out in 20, and it gave a 5-year plan and gives important guidelines to vulture conservation efforts for the next 5 years. It provides timeline for achieving the targets. Uh, so the major plan involves to prevent poisoning of principal food of vultures, the cattle carcasses, carry out safety testing of new veterinary NSAIDs on vultures prior to commercial release, and institute a system which automatically removes drug from veterinary use if it is found to be toxic to vultures with the help of drug controllers in India, and establish conservation breeding program of red-headed and Egyptian vultures. Thank you very much. That's all what I have to say. I am really grateful for Bombay Nature Society. It's my alma mater and worked there for 40 years. Haryana Forest Department has been very helpful. Ministry of Environment Forest, it's a Central Zoo Authority sponsored project. Royal Society for Protection of Birds have provided funds and technical support, and we greatly acknowledge their help. International Birds of Prey of UK has been very helpful in providing technical support. Thank you very much. And Indian Veterinary Research Institute has been very helpful. Thank you so much. This is all what I have to say, and I will be happy to answer any questions if you have.
Thank you so much, sir, for wonderful presentation. Sir, you can stop sharing the screen. I can request participants to ask any questions if they have. They can unmute themselves and ask directly or write it in the chat box.
I don't know how to stop share.
So again, go on the WebEx and from there you can stop sharing. Yes, from here you can stop sharing. Yes. Certain participants have some questions. I can take some. So firstly, I would like to very informative presentation, sir. I would like to know what initially sparked your interest in ornithology and specifically to study raptors and vultures.
Well, I was always interested in predators, especially birds of prey. So and when I joined BNHS, I was first sent to Point Kalimar, but then I was sent to Bharatpur. Bharatpur is a paradise for raptors. You see so many raptors there, almost 42 species, and it was full of vultures. So full of vultures, then the vultures disappeared, and that was all very interesting, which get me hooked onto vultures and raptors.
Okay. Sir, Dr. Akshay Mane has some question. What are the future research perspective on the vultures in captivity?
Well, not much research has been done on captive vultures. There are a lot of things which can be done on captive vultures. Uh, Behavior studies and interactions and their there are so many things which can speed and in fact when they are in captivity you can do things like feeding, your behavior, genetics, and like NCBS, it found out that taking out the fecal samples, you can find out what all they eat by genetics. So all that you can do. All that is possible to be done in the. Offhand, I don't remember, but there is a lot of possibilities of doing research in captive vultures.
Doctor, Eli Raja has
Yeah,
some question. He has raised a hand. You can unmute yourself and ask.
yeah. Can you hear me right now?
Yes, yes, I can. Very low, but yes, I
Yeah,
can.
yeah. What is the measure we need to take, sir, if any lice or ticks infestation is there in the chicks or any juvenile vulture? Parasitic infestation, external parasitic infestation.
Your voice is very low. Can you type it so I can read it out loud?
Okay. External parasitic infestation, what is the measure we can take to control?
External
Uh,
paras. Yeah.
Yeah,
yes, external parasitic. I mean, usually they are mm, there are some sprays which you can use, but usually if they, external parasitic infections happen if the bird is sick. Usually, otherwise you don't get them so often. But I will let you know more about it by asking the veterinarians.
thank you, sir.
Saurabh has one question. He is writing in chat box. Thank you for such an informative session, sir. So, can you please tell how is the inbreeding prevented in the breeding centers?
Well, we usually don't keep the siblings in the center. We usually try to send it to other centers, and we make sure that closely related birds are not kept in the same aviary. Okay.
Any more questions? So, I would like to. Achha, this is. Uh, I would like to ask during reintroduction, what are the things that you like particularly take care of? Like these are the must do things during reintroduction in the wild.
Yeah, thing is you must make sure that the area is safe. There's enough food for them, habitat, and there are no other threats which really can kill vultures. Not a network of electric wires and all that, And so that's why it's important to make sure in a 100 kilometer radius that the area is safe for vultures. So that you do by periodic monitoring for at least couple of years. That and there should be a wild vulture population because these vultures are social birds, and they will actually join the wild vultures. There is very little use of toxic NSAIDs because that is a problem for the vultures. And food availability should be there, habitat, and some areas where there is poison bait problem where people, if their animal is killed by a predators, they usually stuff it with pesticides to kill that predators, but then vultures become the unintended victims. So such issues should not be there when you release the birds.
So, like you said, if we talked about vulture conservation awareness program in 2000s, people would laugh at us.
Yes.
So, what were the challenges that you faced while setting up the conservation breeding centers? Because it was very new concept, everyone was new to this thing. So, what were the challenges that you faced, and how did the centers contribute in the recovery? Yes,
Well, it was very challenging first to make people understand that the vultures are declining. It took a lot of time, even to my own colleagues to tell them the vultures are declining. As I said, the vultures were so numerous that even if you lose 50% or 75% of them, you would have not noticed they're declining because even 25% of 4 crores is a huge number. So first to tell them that the vultures are declining was an issue. Then second, when it was found out that the diclofenac was killing them, many people just didn't believe. Even today, they don't believe it because what happens is there are two things. One is crash in vulture in population, and one is mortality. So mortality can happen due to various reasons like birds colliding with the wire, birds colliding. There's a train accident, or you cut down trees, so mortality happens. But crash in population happens when there is very high adult mortality because adults in vultures, when they reach 5 years, their survival rate is 98% annually. So they never seem to die. So and juveniles in birds like vultures, even 50% mortality of first year birds is there. So death of juveniles is not a problem, but death of adults is a problem. So telling people that diclofenac is killing both adults and juveniles equally, indiscriminately, and that is causing the crash in vulture population was extremely difficult, because they thought that the other factors which are causing the cause of. And then conservation breeding program itself, because we had no experience of that, and it started that we must keep vultures in captivity as a holding facility, because vultures were declining at a tremendous speed. Within a decade or so, we had lost more than 90% of the population, and the rest 10% would have gone very fast if we had not taken measures. So when national and international experts met during 2004 in the recovery plan workshop at Parwanu in Himachal Pradesh, the general feeling was we must catch as many vultures possible and hold them at least till the problem, we know what is causing the crash in population, and once we have removed that, we release them back in the wild. But then it was thought that if you are catching vultures and keeping in the holding it, then might as well breed them, have a conservation breeding program, breed them, and then it will be helpful for that. So it was very challenging, and but gradually it happened. We had support from Caesar Dave, we have support from Jamaya Perry Jones. She is from National Birds of Prey Trust, an expert in breeding programs, and this is how we did it. Yeah.
So catching a raptor is not an easy job. So what were the challenges? What was the roadmap for catching the vultures itself?
Yeah, catching vultures is not easy. Vultures, they are predators, and they can attack you with their bill as well as through claws. But whereas if you catch an eagle, you have to be careful only of its talons. It will never bite you. But vulture will bite you. It has a long neck and it will bite you, and can scratch you very badly. And then it's very intelligent. So what we do is we spread a carcass and then attract vultures. So we have expert trappers who use a thing called snake trap. So they have a long bamboo pole, and it is about 60 feet long, and it is its tip is bifid, and it is very supple. So there they put a glue of ficus latex and mustard oil, and then when the vultures are feeding, this guy just slithers the bamboo to the vulture and puts it in his wings, and he doesn't realize. And then the interior part of the bamboo breaks, and it's with the vultures. So when the vulture realizes, cannot fly. So we go and grab it. So nothing happens to the vulture. The other method is, we make a cage-like thing, and we keep feeding vultures outside the cage, as well as then try to feed them inside the cage, and the vultures start coming in also, and then when they are inside, we drop the netting. So in this way, we get a lot of vultures. So initially, when we started catching vultures, we were buying goats and we were trying to catch them. And when you spread a goat, the dogs will come and finish off. So, and then what we did, we tried to keep the dogs away. And if you keep the dogs away, vultures will not come. Vultures are very, very birds. They are very cautious that the food is safe. So unless the dogs come and other scavengers come, they will not come down. So what we did, we found a big bullock carcass. So that was we spread on, and then we sat down with. Then we found that the dogs came from nearby areas. They fed on it, and dogs cannot feed much. They can feed only 5% of the weight. They feed and they get satiated very fast. Then they will sit around it. And then the vultures came in huge hordes, and then we caught them. So it was all a very learning exercise and all. So they dogs, scavengers, and all have a very have a relationship. You cannot take one thing away from
So what are the steps that local communities can contribute to support vulture conservation? Is there
Well,
any way where local communities can participate in?
well, one thing is they must make sure that their cattle is treated by a trained veterinarian, and then they should make sure that they buy the drugs from on a prescription from a registered pharmacy, so they don't get drugs which are banned and all. So I think that if they do that, that will make a very big difference for the for vulture conservation. So if the veterinarians they treat them, they will not be using banned drugs, and they will. What other thing we notice that uh, uh, because the veterinarians don't treat cattle, the untrained people who treat cattle, they usually stuff animals with drugs, sometimes as much as 35 times the normal drugs. So that also causes problem, and that makes the carcass toxic. So the important thing is that the uh, animal care is done properly and by with trained vets. So it's all one health concept. So animals should be treated properly, humans should be treated properly. Then only your wildlife will be safe.
Okay. Sir, as a key figure in drafting the action plan for vulture conservation, what do you believe in are the most crucial policy measures for safeguarding vultures in India?
Well, as we said that the problem with vultures were, vultures can. We know that vultures can. We have a very acidic digestive system, and they can probably uh, all sick and all kinds of bacteria and all they just get don't survive in their system and they kill them. And but vultures cannot, for certain reasons, could not tolerate the man-made chemicals, which like diclofenac, because they were never exposed to them earlier. So in the action plan for vulture conservation also puts a lot of emphasis that the carcasses should not be poisoned. The drugs which are found to be toxic to vulture should be banned, and the molecules of drugs which are available in the market, which are not tested so far on vultures, should be tested. And then should be a policy that if a drug is found toxic, it should be automatically banned for veterinary use. And any new molecule to be introduced of any stage should be first tested on vultures.
Uh, Participants, do you have any more questions? There seems to be no more questions. So can we conclude the session? I can proceed with the vote of thanks then. Ladies and
Thank you.
gentlemen, as we conclude this episode on behalf of International Vultures Awareness Day, I would like to extend my deepest thanks to Dr. Vibhu Prakash for sharing his immense knowledge and passion for vulture conservation with us. Your dedication has been truly inspiring, and we have been lucky to have you as a expert on a Zooming conservation session. Once again, thank you so much, sir, for your invaluable contribution and for joining us today. To
Thank you so much.
participants, we keep arranging these sessions on multiple species to understand more about current conservation plans of the species. So do join in next time in the Zooming conservation. Thank you.
Thank you so much.